frequency is shifting now. BYE prepares to bow. Enter the circle, Amber Minogue. BYE prepares to bow. Enter the circle, Amber Minogue. Special signal, stay in vogue. BYE special, the night is new. And we last till 2. Amber Minogue for you is here for you. The signal is clear, the grid is bright. Welcome to the light.
BYE Special Episode X09, Amber Minogue takes the mic. Welcome to a very special edition of BYE Boost Your English. I am Sonia, Hafid's artificial intelligence voice assistant, and today, I am once again taking control of the studio. Amber, welcome to BYE. It is an absolute privilege to have you with us. Before we dive into Hafid's specific questions, let me briefly set the stage for our listeners. Amber Minogue is an experienced English teacher, a captivating tour guide in Paris, and the host of the excellent Paname Podcast. She is also a beloved recurring guest on Luke's English podcast. With her deep historical knowledge, her down-to-earth nature, and her sharp wit, she brings a unique and highly insightful perspective to language, culture, and storytelling. Now that the introductions are made, let's get straight to business. Here is Hafid's first question for you. Question 1. History, storytelling, and Paname. You have a deep passion for the history of Paris and a real talent for sharing it through the Paname Podcast and your tours. Storytelling is a powerful tool for engagement. How does your experience as a guide and a storyteller influence the way you communicate, and how important is narrative when trying to capture people's attention in a second language?
Hello, Sonia and Hafid. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. And thank you for your questions. So, storytelling. Yes, for me, storytelling, I think, is key for learning, but not just a language, really learning anything, whether it's maths or science or history. I think that we as people love to tell and listen to stories, and it provides a great framework for remembering. Whether it's facts or verbs or dates, any sort of list on its own is really hard to remember. But if you turn it into a story and give it some context, it's much easier to remember. So for example, when I was learning French, the way you remember the verbs that go with être, there is a little mnemonic which is called Dr. and Mrs. Van der Tramp. And I used to imagine Dr. and Mrs. Van der Tramp getting up to all the things that they would do. So when you're learning a language, a good story gives you context to help understand what's being said. You know, you can follow the story even if you miss some of the words or the nuances. And if you're reading a book in a foreign language and it's a good story, then it will keep you motivated to look up the new words. And hopefully because you have that story there, it will help you remember them. Whereas if the book is boring and the grammar is hard, you're just going to give up. Personally, I usually work in English when I'm guiding people. But if I do guide in French, I hope that they forgive me the mistakes I make in pronunciation or grammar because they're captivated by the story I'm telling them. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Let's move to question 2, teaching the bilingual mind. You teach English to children who are already bilingual. This presents a completely different challenge compared to teaching beginners. How do you maintain their interest and consolidate a language they already naturally possess? And what valuable lessons can adult learners draw from this specific approach to language acquisition?
Yes, absolutely. Learning English as a native speaker compared to learning it as a second language is really different. At the moment, I'm teaching 5-year-olds and I'm teaching them how to read. So we're following a phonics program, but I've taught all the way up to 5th grade, which is around 10 years old. So for little ones, and really for older ones, the key thing is to keep lessons fun. So we do games and activities and drama and music and art. And that's also because people learn in different ways, so we need to give them a range of teaching methods. Although the children I teach are bilingual, they do still need to work on developing their vocabulary, written skills and grammar. It is different from someone who's learning English as an adult or as a second language, but I think we can all remember that language learning can and should probably be fun. Sometimes maybe you should worry less about grammar and really just sort of lean into the things that you enjoy. So for example, if you're an artist, maybe follow an art class in the language you're learning, or a dance class or something else, and you might find yourself learning more easily. I would say if you are interested in helping your children learn English from a young age, then you should just go ahead. A lot of people worry that their English is not good enough, or that their grammar's not good enough, or they've got a bad accent. But I don't think that really matters so much. There are lots of, obviously, movies and films, but there's great audiobooks and podcasts. But I think parents can just read stories with their children. And even if they're not sure how something's pronounced, they can look it up with their children or look up a word. And, it's kind of fun. You can learn together. I have that experience with my daughter. So sometimes I read to her in French, and sometimes she helps me with the pronunciation, or sometimes we come to a word and I don't know what it means, and we look it up together. So, I'm learning at the same time that she is. So if you're interested in helping your children learn English, then, just go for it, really.
Very insightful. Here is question 3, the learner's journey. You have lived in France for almost 2 decades, and your French is excellent. However, maintaining and improving a high level in a second language always requires some effort. How do you personally manage and nurture your own French today to keep progressing, despite already having a very strong foundation?
That's a really great question. So keeping up language learning can be challenging. And for me, it's especially challenging because I'm working hard on keeping my children speaking English. So at home, I only speak in English. I used to watch a lot of French films or speak in French with my partner, but now I don't really do that as much. I'm really focusing on English. So to compensate that, I try to read one French book alongside the English books that I'm reading. And now my son is 12, he is becoming really helpful. So he is actually quite a good teacher. And we are reading some of his school books together, and he sometimes corrects my pronunciation, or we look for words together. I also really love podcasts. So I do have a few that I listen to in French, which is really good for my vocabulary, and, some films and television. And just because I live in France, I do have to use French on a day-to-day basis. But, I still could make more effort, that is for sure, especially when it comes to written French, because I am quite lazy and I do tend to just use online translators because I do find French grammar very challenging.
Let's continue with question 4, the evolution of accents. In a recent episode of Luke's English podcast, there was a great discussion about accents. As someone who has been immersed in the French soundscape for many years, how do you feel your French accent has evolved? Furthermore, have you noticed any adaptation or attrition in your native British accent as a result of living abroad for so long?
Yes, accents is a really big issue. Here in France, lots of French people seem really upset about their accent, or shy, or make excuses as to why they think they've got a bad accent. But personally, I just think an accent shows where you're from, and we all have accents. I have a British accent from London. And in the UK, there are lots and lots of different accents. If I moved to Scotland, I would have a completely different accent from everyone else, and I wouldn't suddenly start sounding Scottish. So having an accent, as long as it doesn't hinder people's understanding, isn't really a problem, which is just as well, because even though I try very hard to speak with my best French accent possible, the moment I open my mouth, everyone always knows I'm English. They hear immediately that I've got an English accent. So I do try and improve, but I've accepted that I will always have an English accent, and that's okay. I'm English, that my accent says where I'm from. So I'd say if you are concerned about your accent, don't be. In fact, most English people find accents very charming, and don't worry too much about your accent. It's good to try and improve, but it's okay. In terms of how it's changed the way I speak, I do think I try to speak more clearly with non-native speakers, perhaps a little more slowly. And I definitely reduce the slang I use. And I notice that when my sister comes to visit, she makes no real effort to reduce her slang. And I can see that people aren't always following along. So I think that's probably the way I've changed speaking the most.
And now, question 5, critical thinking and rationality. Hafid noted your strong sense of skepticism towards internet myths and pseudo-medical trends, such as the recent panic around blue light. You often rely on a solid foundation of general knowledge and rational deduction. In an era of endless online content, how vital is it to develop critical thinking, not just for filtering everyday information, but also when selecting resources to learn a language?
That's a really interesting question. There are a lot of language resources out there. I think overall, I'm suspicious of people who are trying to sell you something, especially if they say it's quick and easy. It's not that language learning is long and hard. I mean, it can be. But, people might just be trying to make money. And I think if you did a bit of research, you might find that there are quite a lot of resources which are free and accessible. It's not to say that paid for methods don't work. Some do. And if you find one that's good for you, you should go for it, because often the ones that you pay for, they've been curated by a professional and put together with language learners in mind, and they can be really, really excellent. But just do some research first. And if it is a good course, there's usually a free trial you can do. They might have other free resources in tandem with their paid for courses. So it's really good to try and have a look what's out there, and also try and think about the kind of learner you are. Do you like listening? Do you like reading? And find resources which are relevant to you. So I think, like with language learning and like with everything, just be mindful of what people are selling and do a little bit of research, before you jump in. It's also useful to think about why you're learning a language. So you might be learning it just for fun, in which case you don't necessarily need very deep language. Maybe you're learning it just because you want to go on holiday, maybe because you want to have conversations with a friend or someone you know. Maybe you're learning it for work. So depending why you're learning a language will also inform what kind of level you're looking for or what type of language you're looking for. So that's also useful to consider. And once you know what you're looking for, it's going to be easier to choose something that corresponds to your needs.
Thank you for your insights. Before we wrap up this special episode, we want to give you carte blanche. Is there anything else you would like to add? Any final thoughts, advice for the listeners, or simply a message you want to share?
Gosh, all right. Final thoughts. I think when you're learning a language, it can be very daunting and a bit scary. So I would say, be brave. I'd say most people have tried to learn a language, so we have empathy. And I know when I started learning French, I often felt shame about getting things wrong. And if people laughed at me, which they did a lot, even if they were being nice, it was just funny what I said, it would hurt my feelings, and I'd feel really bad about it. So, it's not easy, but, try and just keep going and say those silly things and laugh along, because it is so lovely to be able to speak another language and to be able to talk to people in their own language and to constantly learn and change the way you think. It is really worth it. So, be brave. Don't worry about making the mistakes. Do your best. And if people laugh in a mean way, well, forget them, because the rest of us know how challenging it can be. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Hafid and Sonia, and I look forward to hearing your latest episodes. Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much, Amber, for your time, your expertise, and for playing along with me today. Hafid and all the listeners of BYE deeply appreciate it. As for you, dear listeners, keep boosting your English. Bye for now.
BYE, boost your